Hello everyone, on today's tutorial we're going to learn how to build a Strata coaster, more specifically a top hat Strata coaster, more like top thrill dragster in King Dakar. Okay, so we already have FVD++ open here. I've set the station in the launch section. The speed and the length of the launch section is already set, so everything we need to do is start straightforward. Okay, so obviously a strata coaster starts by going up in a pretty much vertical hill, and in order to do that we have to create a force section, and of course with a positive G. I've done some search and I figured out that the top G-force for King Dakar is about 5 Gs. Okay, so we all know that each car on the train does not experience the same amount of Gs at the same time. That means that, for example, the car in the very front can experience 5, whereas the car on the very back can experience something more or less than that. Okay, so just to make the ride safe, I'm gonna set the G-force to about 4.8 and not properly 5. Okay, let's just put it 4.8. Another important thing to know is that in this section here is basically a transition that ranges from about 1G to 4.8 G, right? This is not very much compared to 0 to 4.8, which is something that we're gonna be doing right after that. So in order to make the most of the vertical part of the ride, we are going to set the length of the first section to about half a second, right? And we cannot forget to activate the normal force visualization. This makes our work a lot easier. So in order to keep going up, we need to create a new force section which is going to be constant for 4.8 G, and then one last force section to make it go up in a vertical manner, which means 0 G. Okay, so we're gonna reduce this to about 4.8 G minus 4.8 G, which makes it go up straight. So right now we have a transition that ranges from 4.8 to 0. This range is a bit larger than the one that ranges from 1 to 4.8, so it's ideal to set the length to that to this section to 1 second. Okay, it's gonna last for 1 second. To make sure this is pretty much straight, because in FVD you cannot do things completely straight when it comes to vertical hills, at least not for this case. We're gonna have to pay attention to the pitch right here. It says about 83 degrees, and you want this to be as close to 90 as possible. So we're going to do that by increasing the constant positive G section right here, by increasing its length, which means expanding it. So I think this is the closest that we can get to 90. And right after that, we're gonna have a small section of constant 0 G in order to make it keep going up. So the length of this section can be around 0.6 seconds, okay? And right after that, we can approach the top of the hill. which is what makes up the top head, right? So in order to do that, you're gonna have to make the section like an airtime section sort of thing, which means that we're gonna have to set this to about -8 Gs, okay? One important thing to know now is that at the top of the hill, the train drastically decreases its speed, which means that the g-force at the top of the head is not going to be so much. It's going to be close to 1. Not exactly 1, but something close to it. So we're going to add one more force section and make it about, I'm sorry, I was decreasing it, I had to increase it, and make it about 0.6 G right here, okay? But one more thing, right now we have something that ranges from -G to +G and then -G again. This is important to know because you guys have to visualize how symmetrical the top head is on both sides, okay? So to make it symmetrical, we just need to set the type of the section to quartic and just increase it until it reaches the other side. So we have pretty much our top hat here, the top of the top hat. If you want to be as accurate as more, I'm sorry, if you want to be very accurate about the top hat when it comes to symmetry, you can remove the section and just make sure that the height of this section right here is where exactly you want it to be. So we have about 136 meters, right? To make it pretty much symmetrical, the other side has to end at the same height, which means at 136 meters. So let's rebuild it again. About 0.6 quartic, and increase it until you reach 136, which is about here, right? So from now on, we just have to build everything symmetrical related to the other side. So one more force section that ranges from from -0.8 to 0. Quintic. And then a constant vertical section of 0 that is 0.6 seconds in length. And then a +G section of about 5, which is actually 4.8. Okay, quintic again. And then just one more force section to complete the course of the coaster. Okay, so we've reached a very important point here. This is pretty much a top hat, right? But is there any roll in it? No. The roll it what characterizes top thrill dragster and King Dakar, right? So in order to build a proper top hat here, you're gonna have to change the roll at a certain point. And what point is it going to be? So for the first part, we're going to reduce the row section of the entire ride until it reaches the very beginning of the vertical section, which is about here. Okay? And then we're gonna create a new row section that goes from this point right here until the end of the vertical part of the ride, which is close to the top of the head. Not at the very top, but very close to it. This is gonna have about 2.5 seconds of length, and then you can just go ahead and append one more section and lock it. Now we're going to work on this part of the ride, which is the first row. So by applying some specific value of row here, we're gonna have the result that we want for the very first part. Okay, you can actually get close to the grid just to assess the symmetry when it comes to the it has to be perpendicular, like this part to this part right here, the beginning and the top of the top hat. It's pretty much aligned with the grid, right? It's somehow what we want. So I'd say this is a good result. And now for the second part of the ride, we're gonna have a 200. The first row is of about 90 degrees, and the second row, which is the second and last part of the ride, is about 270 degrees, right? So for this part, we're gonna click one more time on the roll section, unlock it, and decrease it until it reaches the beginning of the vertical part. One specific thing about this part is that in order to make this more accurate when it comes to real coasters such as King Dakar, it's important that you start the roll not exactly where the vertical parts start, but where the negative g-force close to the top hat ends, which is about here. If the result is not exactly what we want, we can adjust it later. But by experience, I could say that this is the right thing to do right now. And this row is gonna end where the vertical part ends, which is about here. Okay. Yeah, I think here is fine. Then we're gonna add one more row section, which is gonna be constant, and lock it. Now we're gonna work on this row section right here, which is the one before the last one. By changing the roll value, we can adjust this to 270 degrees, which is exactly what we want. One thing that I forgot to do here, but it's optional, is that the tension, you can adjust the tension. I usually like to adjust the tension just to make it smoother, so we can just go ahead and do it. I usually adjust it to -1, but of course you're going to work a little bit more on that. After adjusting the tension, you have to work a little bit more on the row just to make sure it's aligned with the grid once again. And the same thing for this part, -1, okay? So now we have our top hat done, or pretty much done. So right here you can notice that this part in the middle of the top hat, it's wider than the one at the bottom, right? You can adjust that by either increasing or decreasing one of the row sections. In this case, you're gonna pick this one and decrease it a little bit, like that. So you notice that it's a little bit wider than it was at first. And another thing that you can also adjust here is the height of this little part here at the bottom of the top hat. Let's say you're gonna make something more like King Dakar. So there's a camelback at the bottom that starts at the bottom of the top hat. So that leaves you more room to make this last positive G part longer, which means that you can increase the vertical section of your right, the second vertical section of your right, like this, okay? If you were to build a top thrill dragster like coaster, you would have to leave some room here at the bottom to make the brakes. That means that you would have to sort of leave enough space to make the range between 4.8 and 1 G, because it's a straight section, right? But right now, the purpose of the tutorial is just to teach you guys how to build a top hat. We have accomplished that right now, so I would say it's a good result. As always, you can as I always say, you can always play a little bit with the length and the values of the rolls, just to shape it according to your taste or according to your needs, okay? So we can test our top hat and see if the result is good. So I think it's a good top hat. Unfortunately, my computer doesn't have a lot of features to make the visualization of the ride smoother, but I'd say it's definitely a good top hat. So if you guys like this video, just leave a like right there, give it a like, and thanks for watching.